The stranger removed his hat before speaking. "All I need is milk for my children." The widow standing on the porch looked at the little girl holding his hand, and the sleeping boy wrapped inside his worn coat. Snow clouds gathered behind them. She hesitated. "My ranch can't afford charity." The man nodded. "I'm not asking for charity." He looked toward the broken corral fence leaning against the wind. "I'll earn every drop." She folded her arms. "Doing what?" He glanced across the neglected property. "Whatever needs fixing." Silence settled between them. The widow's name was Sarah Whitmore. She had buried her husband only 8 months earlier after a horse accident during spring roundup. Since then, keeping the ranch alive had become nearly impossible. Half the fences leaned. One barn door no longer closed. The windmill groaned every time it turned. 2 hired hands had already left for better-paying work. Now winter waited only weeks away. The stranger extended his hand. "My name's Daniel Carter." Sarah didn't shake it. Instead, she studied his children. The little girl couldn't have been older than 7. The boy perhaps 4. Both looked exhausted. "When did they last eat?" Daniel answered honestly. "Yesterday." Sarah sighed. "Bring them inside." The children finished 2 bowls of stew before speaking a single word. Fresh milk disappeared almost as quickly. Daniel waited quietly until they finished, then stood. "Where do I start?" Sarah blinked. "You've barely eaten." "I said I'd work." She pointed toward the broken front gate. "It won't stay shut." Daniel walked outside immediately. Within an hour, the gate swung smoothly again. Instead of simply replacing loose boards, he reshaped warped hinges over a small forge, reinforced the posts with stone packed beneath the soil, and adjusted the latch so winter frost wouldn't jam it. Sarah noticed. Most men repaired problems. Daniel prevented them from returning. The following morning, he rebuilt a section of collapsed fencing. The day after that, he repaired leaking gutters feeding the ranch's rain barrels. Then he climbed onto the barn roof. Sarah watched from below. "You know roofing?" Daniel smiled. "I know water." That answer puzzled her. He explained while working. Most roofs don't fail because of rain. They fail because people ignore where water goes afterward. By sunset, melted snow would drain away instead of soaking the timber. Again, he wasn't repairing today's problem. He was preventing tomorrow's. The children settled quickly into ranch life. Emily helped gather eggs. Little Noah followed Sarah everywhere, fascinated by the horses. Within a week, laughter returned to the ranch for the first time since her husband's death. Sarah noticed something else. Daniel never spoke about the children's mother. She never asked. One evening, after supper, Emily quietly answered the question anyway. "Mom died from fever last winter." Sarah looked toward Daniel. He simply nodded once. No words followed. None were needed. As autumn deepened, Daniel walked every acre of the ranch carrying nothing but a notebook. Sarah finally asked, "What are you writing?" "Everything winter will break." She frowned. "It hasn't snowed yet." "It will." He handed her the notebook. Every page contained careful sketches. Weak fence corners. Old cottonwood trees leaning toward buildings. Barn doors facing prevailing winds. Poor drainage near the livestock pens. Loose shingles. Frozen water risks. Sarah looked up. "You found all this in 3 days?" Daniel smiled. "The ranch was trying to tell us. The ranch talks. If you know what to watch." Over the next month, they worked from sunrise until darkness. The leaning windmill came first. Daniel dismantled the worn gears, cleaned every bearing, carved replacement teeth from seasoned oak. When finished, the wheel spun almost silently. Then came the livestock shelters. Instead of building larger barns, he added removable windbreak walls made from old fence boards. Simple, strong, easy to repair. The cattle immediately gathered behind them during cold evenings. Even Sarah admitted the difference. One afternoon, Daniel discovered an abandoned root cellar beneath the old smokehouse. Most of the ceiling had collapsed. Others would have filled it with dirt. Daniel climbed inside. Stone walls remained solid. The underground temperature felt noticeably warmer than outside. An idea formed immediately. Over the next week, he rebuilt the ceiling using heavy cedar beams. Added shelves, ventilation, drainage. By the end, the cellar stored potatoes, carrots, apples, canned food, lantern oil, medicine, and emergency grain. Sarah watched him carry another crate below ground. "We've never needed this much storage." Daniel smiled gently. "You've never met the winter I'm expecting." She noticed the seriousness in his voice. "What makes you say that?" He pointed toward the mountains. The elk came down nearly 3 weeks early. She looked. Large herds grazed lower than usual. The geese changed routes. The squirrels stopped burying food near the creek. The first ice stayed on the ponds all day. Sarah crossed her arms. You think that's enough to predict winter? No. What is? All of it together. She trusted him enough not to argue. Word spread through the valley. People laughed. The widow hired a weather prophet. Others joked. Next he'll tell the cows when to moo. Daniel ignored them. Instead, he quietly doubled the ranch's firewood supply. Not beside the cabin. Beneath a covered lean-to with raised timber flooring and canvas-lined walls to keep every log dry. He insulated exposed water pipes with wool scraps. Built snow markers along hidden fence lines. Strengthened the stable doors with diagonal braces. Even Emily and Noah helped. The ranch slowly transformed. Not into a richer ranch. A stronger one. Late one afternoon, Sarah found Daniel staring toward the northern peaks. Dark clouds rested low behind the mountains. The wind carried an unfamiliar sharpness. You've got that look again, she said. He answered without turning. My father taught me something. What? When animals hurry, people should too. That evening, he moved every horse into the lower pasture. Filled every water trough. Closed every storm shutter. Before sunrise, he knocked softly on Sarah's bedroom door. It's here. She looked outside. The stars had disappeared. A wall of white rolled over the mountains. Not drifting snow. A blizzard. And it was moving faster than she'd ever seen. The blizzard struck before the sun cleared the horizon. Within hours, the ranch vanished beneath blowing snow. Fence posts disappeared. The trail into town became impossible to follow. The wind screamed through the cottonwoods, snapping branches as thick as a man's arm. Sarah looked toward Daniel. What now? He answered calmly. Now we trust the work. The cattle gathered behind the windbreak walls he had built from old fence boards. Instead of facing the full force of the wind, they stood shoulder to shoulder in the protected lanes. Snow piled against the outside of the barriers while the animals remained remarkably calm. Inside the barn, every door closed tightly. No freezing drafts swept through the stalls. Daniel checked each horse carefully. They're warm enough. Sarah looked around in disbelief. They've never settled this quickly during a storm. They're spending less energy fighting the wind. By the second day, the blizzard became even worse. One hired ranch from the neighboring valley sent 2 exhausted riders through the storm. Our hay barn collapsed. Our water pump froze. Daniel handed them hot coffee before asking another question. How many families? 3. Bring them here. Sarah looked surprised. We barely know them. They'll freeze if they stay. Before nightfall, 3 wagons reached the ranch. Women, children, elderly parents. Everyone crowded inside the rebuilt barn and the ranch house. The root cellar became the food room. Its steady underground temperature kept vegetables, milk, and preserved meat from freezing despite the bitter cold outside. Sarah smiled as she watched Daniel carry another crate upstairs. You plan for more people than us. He nodded. My father always stored enough for one unexpected family. She looked around the crowded kitchen. You plan for 3. Daniel smiled softly. I've learned winter rarely travels alone. On the 3rd morning, disaster nearly struck. A loud crack echoed across the ranch. One corner of the old equipment shed collapsed beneath the weight of drifting snow. Sarah gasped. If that had been the barn. It wasn't. Daniel looked toward the livestock. Because we repaired the right building first. The storm continued for another 4 relentless days. Every evening Daniel walked the property with a lantern. Not because repairs were possible. Because small problems became large ones if ignored. He cleared drifting snow away from the stable doors before it froze solid. He opened the windmill brake whenever heavy ice threatened the gears. He checked every water trough twice daily. Emily followed whenever she could. Why don't you wait until the storm ends? Daniel smiled. Winter never waits. The little girl nodded thoughtfully. She never forgot the lesson. On the 7th day, the wind finally weakened. Daniel climbed the highest ridge overlooking the valley. What he saw stole his breath. Several ranches stood badly damaged. Collapsed roofs. Broken corrals. Snow-covered wagons abandoned where they had stopped. Returning home, he organized teams immediately. Every healthy man borrowed horses from Sarah's ranch. Every wagon carried hay, food, blankets, and tools. Instead of waiting for help, they became it. At the Harper Ranch, they dug 2 children from a snowed-in bunkhouse. At another homestead, they rescued livestock trapped behind collapsed fencing. By sunset, every neighboring family had reached safety. People quietly noticed something. Sarah's ranch had suffered the least damage in the valley. The fences remained standing. The livestock survived. The water system still worked. Food supplies remained plentiful. It wasn't luck. It was preparation. Several days later, while repairing the smokehouse floor above the root cellar, Daniel discovered a loose foundation stone. Behind it rested a small metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were old journals belonging to Sarah's late husband, William. She sat quietly beside the fire reading them. William had filled page after page with plans for improving the ranch. Drainage ditches, windbreaks, better feed storage, a larger cellar beneath the smokehouse. One unfinished sentence caught her attention. "If I ever find someone who understands this ranch better than I do." The page ended there. No more words. Sarah looked across the room at Daniel sharpening an axe. Without realizing it, William had described him years before they met. Spring finally arrived. Snow melted from the hillsides. Green shoots covered the lower pastures. News of the ranch's survival spread throughout the county. People came expecting to see some miracle. Instead, they found repaired roofs, strong fences, healthy cattle, dry firewood, a root cellar filled with careful planning. The county livestock inspector walked the property for nearly 2 hours. Finally, he turned to Sarah. This ranch wasn't saved by one decision. She smiled. No, it was saved by hundreds of small ones. During the annual spring gathering, the mayor addressed the valley. This winter taught us something. He looked toward Daniel. Preparation isn't fear. It's responsibility. No one argued. Sarah walked outside after the meeting. Daniel stood repairing one final gate. "You finished." He smiled. "Ranches are never finished." She laughed. "I meant your bargain." He looked puzzled. "You asked for milk." "I did. You gave us back a future." Daniel looked toward Emily and Noah playing beside Sarah's horses. "They gave my children one first." Several months later, Sarah handed him a folded property deed. "I can't accept this. I'm not giving you the ranch." He looked relieved. She smiled. "I'm giving you half." Daniel stared at her. "You earned it." He slowly folded the paper. "I came here asking for milk." Sarah nodded. "And you became the reason this ranch still exists." Years afterward, travelers often stopped at the Whitmore Carter Ranch. They admired the healthy cattle and sturdy buildings. But longtime neighbors remembered something far more important. A hungry father had arrived asking for nothing more than milk for his children. He left having built something far greater than repaired fences or stronger barns. He built a family. And when the hardest winter in memory finally came, everyone understood that the greatest strength on the ranch had never been the buildings. It was the man who had quietly prepared them all.